sounds like the way it falls downhill in a hurry.
So just some highlights, you know, the Sustained Yield Forest Management Act was passed in 1944 with the idea of promoting stability in forest communities. You know, making sure there's no timber supply, among other things. And the Lakeview Federal Sustained Yield Unit was actually designated in 1950. Part of the designation requires that we do a 10-year review. See if the unit is still meeting its objectives, are we still providing the services intended? Are we being successful? Most recently completed review was in 2010, and at that point, Chuck Graham, who was then the forest supervisor, one of the alternatives he had was to terminate the unit because the indications were that it was not meeting the objectives, it potentially was going to basically collapse, it wasn't going to continue to be successful. At that time, Collins Pine, I believe they were still a lone mill, were not willing to go down that road. They weren't willing to agree to the idea of terminating the unit. Since then, we've had a number of changes. In 2017, shortly after I arrived, I sat down, met with Collins, met with some of our own folks, and everybody was in agreement that at the current rate of production out of the unit, we probably have less than 7 years worth of material left. So the unit is not sustainable. At the current combination of the current rate and current practices, we've worked on trying to adjust some of the practices. If we did that, we might be able to extend another 2 to 3 years, but not much more. So, raised some concerns both sides, and the reality is that Berry Point fire would cause issues. It did reduce things, arbitrarily reduce the sustainability of the unit. So based on what we've been seeing, what we've been hearing, the discussions we've been having for the last 2 years, 2018, last August, Collins sent a letter to the acting regional forester, identifying 4 main things in there that caught our attention. One is the 12 million board feet that we're putting out through the unit right now. The commitment is not enough to sustain the mill. They're actually operating about 50 million board feet a year. So we can't be the sole source of material. The long-term outlook doesn't look any better. In fact, it's probably looking worse than it did a few years ago. And the statement that really stood out for us is, in their letter, Collins stated that the unit is now a detriment to operating a forest products facility. And they've asked us to consider suspension of the unit. So in response, our acting regional forester said we will accelerate the 10-year study. We tried to begin it last fall before we all had to go home for a month or so. The shutdown. So we've got a couple of different things going on. One is acceleration review. And part of what we're looking at on that from our side is the current process required to sell timber off the unit is it's an administrative burden for us. Because of some things associated with the unit, the law, contracting, and such, we basically have to offer every sale out of the unit twice. Collins has said they're not going to bid on a sale that comes out with all the stipulations that are part of the unit. If the sale goes no bid, which obviously it's going to, then we have to re-offer it. And anybody can bid it without them because we don't have those stipulations. So it's becoming a hassle for us, and it's not meeting Collins' bids. So shortly after that letter, the change letters, we started the review process for the unit to see. Basically, there is a procedure we have to go through to determine whether or not we can continue the unit or we need to terminate it. And with that, Chuck's been handling that process and holding through on that.
So we hired a consultant back in December who started actually after the furlough was over, so she started in February. She analyzed all the data of timber sales on our forest, both inside the unit and outside the unit. She's interviewed folks from Collins, folks from the community, and we have and received last week a draft of the report, which is not available yet because there's still a few changes. But basically, what this report does is it goes through the conditions and trends of the region, social and economic conditions of Lake County, talks about the Lake County forest products sector, the contribution of the unit to the local forest products sector, and then provides an evaluation and summary of some of the findings. And right now, I think she's done a really good job because some of the things that have led to the situation we're in right now, as far as the timber supply, as she points out in this report, really kind of started back in the early 90s when the Forest Service adopted these site screens, and we saw about an 80% decline in timber output at that point in time. And then in the early 2000s, when the Forest Service moved more to restoration type activities because of Healthy Forest Initiative, the Healthy Forest Restoration Act, National Fire Plan, and those types of initiatives. A lot of the treatments that the Forest Service does now are smaller trees, a change in species. So for example, less pines being harvested and more white fir. And so a lot of that contributed to changes in how the unit was functioning. For example, the secondary manufacturers, wood grain and the like, they located here because they wanted to be able to buy the industrial boards that the pine mills were manufacturing at the time. Well, those are gone, because now they're manufacturing mostly conventional lumber out of fir. So a lot of the secondary mills left. There's still, as she points out, there's 2 remaining still, but based on her analysis, it's very clear that those 2 mills are purchasing their materials from outside the unit, which is another indication that the unit's not really meeting its objectives.
You're talking the door plants?
Yes.
Yeah. Which were years ago, under the molding plants, wood grain, like lumber or Lindor, they weren't manufacturing doors, they were manufacturing styles and door jambs and everything. Cut stock.
And then, as Barry pointed out, the other very significant event that happened in the unit was Berry Point Fire. And when you look at the data in this report, you'll see the timber sales inside the unit in the past 8 years, the period of this report study, declined. In fact, there was 1 year we didn't offer any timber. And there were 2 reasons for that. One, Collins had a 10-year contract. So when volume was awarded for that, even though it was done over the course of several years, it was being attributed to the year that the contract was first awarded. So it looks like some years we weren't offering timber when in fact we were. It's just the way that it was being accounted for and reported. But the Berry Point Fire also led to Collins very aggressively salvaging their own fee lands that had burned. And they were also salvaging on the MODOC pretty extensively, so they weren't, in fact, I don't think Collins bought any of the fire salvage off of Berry Point inside the unit. And then the third thing is that a lot of the, what I refer to as the low-hanging fruit, that is the flatter, more conventional logging type grounds, have pretty much already been treated. And we're looking at those steeper slopes that haven't been treated yet, and they raise all sorts of other issues, economics, fuel loading, things like that. And so Collins, because of their fee lands getting burned and the situation on the federal lands inside the unit, they just simply have to expand their wood basket to be able to keep the mill running. They've been getting some logs off of a sale down on the MODOC to date. I'm not aware of any other sales they've got down south, but they have bought on us sales outside the unit already. The Watson Creek Fire Salvage is currently being advertised right now. They're taking a look at that. And that's both inside and outside the unit. And this, like Barry was pointing from an administrative perspective, that posed a problem because we had the potential of having to do 4 separate contracts because we would have had to do some inside the unit, some outside the unit. Unfortunately, Collins sent us a letter that I refer to as our hall pass, where they said, don't worry about it, just sell the whole thing like it's an open timber sale, because they saw the administrative hassle we would have had to go through, and they just said, just sell it as an open sale, which helped us out a great deal. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. The study, the process is that we will have a draft ready for public review, hopefully by the end of this month. And then sometime in August, we'll schedule a public hearing and take testimony from anybody that would like to. And then after that, we'll finalize the report, and we will formulate recommendations to the regional forester, who will then make his recommendations to the chief on what to do.
So, couple of things, just sitting here. One thing that wasn't mentioned that has an impact on it, you guys have no control over within the unit, the 21-inch DBH definitely has an impact. The sawmill changed over to the small logs and they still have the big logs. I also, stewardship contracts, which we supported, I said on the original committee to start those. There's just not enough timber within the unit at the production rate that you mentioned here. So the amount of small logs available definitely go through that side, through the unit isn't there anymore. I know that people are working on the 21-inch DBH, but that would have a big impact also to our sawmill. You guys have no control over there. It's not founded other than policy, I believe, is what I've been told in the past. But your study probably should note that with the 21-inch DBH definitely has an impact on the sustainability of the sawmill and the unit, I would think. I'm not opposed to the unit going away today's world, myself individually, because we're down to one sawmill. That's the only tool you guys have to manage this forest. So important to us, economic development, jobs, job creation. So we have to, it's a different day than 1950. Today's production's at a higher rate, even with small logs. So myself individually, I support the direction that the sawmill is asked to go. I just want to make that note about the 21-inch DBH on your study. It should reflect in there compared to when this unit was put together in 1950. You were allowed to cut trees at a sustainable rate. So, just a couple of comments. Board have any comments?
I completely support getting rid of it.
Yeah. No objection here.
So you guys, your time frame here, looking at it is, you're just talking about it, Chuck. The recommendation will be November, December, will be the recommendation. Once that recommendation's made, what kind of time frame do you think it would take if the recommendation's accepted?
Well, this is the Washington office we're talking about.
Well, didn't you work in the Washington office?
No.
Very
Very
good.
I would hope by the time we go through our process and the original force was signed off, I would hope it'd be relatively simple to get an answer, but we will be moving into the start of the election cycle, so people in DC may be a little reluctant to give us a rapid answer.
Yeah. Well, twofold. For the last sawmill here, it's that important, and for you guys have to do double the work, basically, to just be able to get around what's in, I guess, law or policy you guys have. The sooner the better, it seems like, for the amount of work for the agency themselves to just be able to get the product to the sawmill. Is there anything that you need from the Board of Commissioners, a letter of support, supporting the sawmill, or is there anything like that that would help the agency?
I think anything that the board would want to put forth, would be happy to include it in our project record that we send it through the regional office and the watershed office. And we did include, I know there's a map in there, brief paper, and copies of both letters from last year, one from Collins and the one back from our acting regional forester. And then you'll receive a copy of the report also, once we get through the drafting and editing phase.
Okay. So I would assume the board would be okay sending a letter of supporting Collins Company's request to do away with
See it, absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll probably have Melanie put that together for us to sign. Other questions?
Does anyone else have any questions in the audience?
We got about 10 minutes before our next, so if there's nothing else, we'll just move on with our agenda, because I believe there might be other people coming for the fire update, and who's here, and it's time. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate the update.
Chuck?
Okay, we got, as I said, 10, 11 minutes before our next timed item. So, looking through the agenda here, looks like, Melanie, we're going to do your work on your three things, possibly just for updates, not for action today. We'll take action tomorrow. So the first thing I have for you is ODOT agreement 33,580 and 5310 operating.
This agreement is with ODOT. They are a pass-through agency for the FDA. These are federal funds for operations for the next biennium. The fiscal impact would be $124,074.
And that's for the biennium?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Questions on that, this special transportation dollar?
I have no questions. Everything looks really good to me.
All right, so,
Dates are correct, it's good.
you know, sometimes there's added funds come through or different things, but this is the start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, next item I have is LCSCA Service Provider Agreement for tomorrow.
Mhm. This is one of the providers that we pass the money down from us. It would be for $132,291 for the biennium. And that is allocated by our Special Transportation Committee. And then the other one is exactly the same, but it's for Intercourt Family Center. And it's for $108,873 for the next biennium for operations.
Okay, for it's the start of a new biennium, do you have to, we go out for an RFP, or are we able to just use the existing providers?
We're allowed to use the existing providers. I did publicize that there were opportunities available if anyone was interested. And if I had other parties interested, then I would fly it, but.
All right, just making sure we're in compliance with the provider. Any questions on that from the board?
No, I think it looks good, both for the Intercourt Family Center, the service agreement, as well as the
Okay.
Senior Citizens Association.
So with that, everything else, we need people in some of our staff here to go over the other things. We got one thing, you're carrying forward the trade on to the OHA agreement.
Oh, yeah.
You want to hit that?
I want to go through that real quick.
This is mental health. County is mental health authority, so things come through us. You have a little bit of an update. This is a biennium agreement, I believe. James, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just pretty standard. I talked to Larry Briggs, and It's just updating a few things for this biennium. The one issue that they had was when they sent it to us, the exhibits in the agreement reflected a 2017 to 2019 biennium dates. And so they've corrected those, but they've asked us to just, or they're in the process of correcting those. And they've asked us to do the signatures on page 3, and then they're going to follow up on those. We're going to complete and return Exhibit F, Section 18, once everything's done, and they'll be making sure that it's all in order.
Okay.
But it's pretty much the same, the agreement's all there, it's about a 300-page document, but it's,
You fully understand the.
no,
whole
I do
thing.
not. I do not fully understand it, that's why I called Larry Briggs, but.
That's the reason why we have a director.
I was really appreciative of the, yeah, unfortunately Trace could not be here today, as she's, doing a presentation for her school, so, for her school meeting.
So tomorrow we should be able to approve this contingent upon the dates being correct.
Correct.
Sounds good.
And those dates have been changed to 2019 to 2021 biennium.
All right. So we're still stumbling around here. We're going to take a 7-minute break until our next presentation at 9:30.
All right. Does anyone know if Judy was coming?
I think she's coming, I'm not sure.